So good morning and welcome everyone here in a room, and thank you for everyone also who are joining us through the online channels. I'm extremely delighted to be able to moderate a panel on a 5G future, not just smoke and mirrors. My name is Annette Numa and I'm a digital transformation advisor from the Estonia Briefing Center, and also in the next 45 minutes I will be moderating this panel, so I will be your moderator here. So making sure that all the EU businesses and citizens have timely access to 5G coverage is very essential to make sure that our market is very well-functioning and also competitive. The COVID-19 pandemic has showed us the importance of resilient and high-speed communication for remote working in our daily lives and to maintain businesses, operations, and of course also different processes. 5G is also one of the 7 flagship areas of recovery funds, a significant share of its target, 150 billion euros on digital budget should finance 5G network infrastructures as well in the future. A fast connectivity has a large impact on economic and innovation and social well-being, but is a proper 5G network connection and coverage only enough for the EU to be competitive in a region in the world? So this is exactly what we are going to discuss today here with our wonderful experts who are sadly joining me virtually and not here on a stage. First, I'm very happy to introduce our first panelist, who is Michael van Bellinghen, who works as a chairman in BEREC Riga. And Mr. van Bellinghen has a Master of Law. He has been elected to serve as a chair of BEREC since 2021. So welcome. Secondly, we have Piers O'Donoghue, who works as a director in Future Networks in the European Commission, DG Connect, and he is dealing with the policy developments, research as regard 5G networks, IoT, cloud and data flows, service platforms, next generation internet as well here. And as a third person, last cherry on a cake here, we have Ulf Persson, who is the head of the government and industry relations in Ericsson. And if I'm correct, he is joining us all the way from Sweden. So hello to you as well. Mr. Persson is responsible for the telecom and regulatory trade policy at Ericsson and leveraging over 30 years of experience in government and telecommunications. He is also the architect of the company's strategy focus in developing strong ties between the government and regulations around all the world. But before I'm going to kick off with my first question here, there is also a couple of housekeeping rules as well here. So if our audience wants to engage with this panel here, I would kindly suggest you also to ask questions. There is 3 options for that. First of all these people that I have together here in the room, you can just raise your hand and then we can give you the microphone. So please just let us know if you do have any questions. The second option to people that are joining us also virtually, you can also ask questions over the GLOBSEC app, which is working over the Slido. And then the last option, of course, is to connect over Zoom to the virtual studio as well. So you can also ask your questions there, and please do use this chance because not every day you get to ask about 5G future from such experts that we have together with me here today. Okay, so starting with the very first question to kick off our panel discussion here. So I do have a question that is mostly addressed now to Ulf, firstly. So what are the necessary and urgent next steps to build out a nationwide full 5G network in Europe?
Thank you, Annette, and sorry not to be able to join you in beautiful Bratislava. So, I mean, first, let me just emphasize that Europe really needs high-performing full 5G networks now to stay competitive, because as we see, leading regions in Asia and North America are, as we speak, deploying nationwide 5G using mid-band spectrum, providing gigabit speeds to users and creating a very high performance of the network everywhere across country. And we saw that also in the latest Ericsson mobility report that we published earlier this week, that Europe is falling behind. I mean, Northeast Asia is leading ahead of North America, and also the GCC countries in the Middle East ahead of Europe when it comes to 5G rollout. And high-performing 5G, full 5G networks, I should say, They must be seen as a critical digital infrastructure. They are a cornerstone of our society and our economy, and they will support the economic and social recovery also from COVID. And high-performance full 5G coverage is enabled on mid-band spectrum and is required to enable new advanced use cases, because we also have to recognize that the sort of first phase of 5G will mean enhanced mobile broadband. It's sort of a 4G on steroids, if you like. But when we move to full 5G, based on what we call standalone 5G architecture, that will really make a revolutionary change, since it will offer low latency, fast response times, and enabling automation and virtualization and network slicing capabilities. So we really need to move to that stage soon in Europe as well.
Thank you, Ulf. And I would also address this question to Piers. You are joining us in Brussels, am I correct? Have any comments on what Ulf was saying?
Well, good morning, Annette. Good morning to all. I am very sorry that I'm not with you in Bratislava, but thank you for the invitation. It is the case that we see global competitors in other regions of the world making great advances. We do have some good cases in the European Union, with countries that are reaching even 80% coverage, even before we come to what Ulf referred to as the standalone 5G. So 5G rollout has been progressing very well in some areas, but of course not still providing the true dynamic, ultra high speed, low latency networks that we need. We do have, a set of targets in Europe, and they have, for the rollout of 5G, depended to a large extent on spectrum deployment, the licensing of spectrum. And while we did have success in identifying the 3 pioneer bands for radio spectrum, that gave us also a sense of purpose, and it allowed for some coordination. It's not just enough with the first wave of licensing to have coverage. What we need is the mid-band spectrum to be available and operational for those applications which I've just mentioned, but which are very critical because they will create the demand for 5G services, particularly from business users from the vertical sectors who will use this high-speed, reliable, ultra-secure network capacity for all of their operations and services. So for business-to-business services, but also for internal organization and for the digitalization of all aspects of the value chain. And that is really what 5G is about. It is that shift which we still have to mainstream in Europe in order for people to understand that this is critical for our competitiveness. It's critical actually for our economic recovery from the COVID crisis, and it will provide a basis for innovation, for productivity, and of course for competitiveness, as I've said, for all sectors of the industry. Now, we can come back to the question of comparing ourselves to other regions, but the fact is that Europe's future is in its hands, and we now need to seize the opportunity of 5G, which is ready to be deployed.
Thank you for your opening remarks as well here for the first question. I would now turn all the way to Michael. I do not know what city you're joining us at the moment, but I also have a question for you. We know that the European Commission has deployed a 5G action plan. Can we say that the implementation of 5G strategy has been successful so far? And what has been the biggest challenges in the process?
Thank you very much, Annette, and hello everybody. And again, sorry not to be here with you in Bratislava. So, and thank you also for giving me the opportunity to explain the role of BEREC as a facilitator in the process. I think that it's totally clear for us that we have made promoting the full connectivity as one of our key priorities for the 5 coming years. And this means that we prioritize the work that improves general conditions for the expansion and the take-up of secure, reliable, and competitive networks in the very high capacity networks, both fixed and mobile, while ensuring the transition from legacy infrastructure. So we just don't only focus on 5G coverage, EMF issues, but also less visible aspects such as backhaul and the copper switch off. And of course, when you look at the digital agenda, there is a lot of European instruments need to be implemented. And yes, so far it's not totally the case. The first one is of course the timely implementation of the European Electronic Communications Code. You know that 24 countries have received an infringement letter from the Commission a few weeks ago. In addition to that, you need to implement the BEREC guidelines in helping a consistent and harmonized implementation of the codes. BEREC has adopted a dozen of guidelines so far. There is a connectivity toolbox to ensure a timely investment-friendly access to 5G spectrum. Please just refer to the need to get access to 5G spectrum as soon as possible. There is also instruments to reduce the costs, the administrative costs and civil engineering costs. So the review of the burden cost reduction is still underway, and it will really help the implementation of this agenda. More specifically on 5G, there is a roadmap, and when we look at this roadmap, we come to the conclusion there are many aspects to be taken into consideration. Some of them I've just mentioned, but also coverage indicators, international roaming. And that's what we are working on within BEREC. We have a dedicated workflow on 5G cyber security for the implementation of 5G toolbox. There will be a report on backhaul, which is important as well. We just had 2 weeks ago a workshop on the impact of 5G on regulations with stakeholders like representatives of verticals. We will have other workshops on coverage and indicators, and also I have just finally to mention that we developed last year a radar, 5G radar, which describes in details the next steps we need to undertake for the coming years. So yes, the digital agenda is not totally a reality, and we still need to push ahead for 5G. Over to you, Annette.
Yeah, thank you. When we talk about like different countries, how far they are currently with the implementation process inside of the European Union, I would say we see drastic changes, drastic like differences as well, and in time it has changed a lot. How could the European Union and push and help the member states with this development process in the best possible ways, and to speed up the process of developments in different countries? So I would turn this question first to Piers, and then maybe Ulf, you can also add something from your side.
Certainly, yes, thank you, because that is very important. We're not just taking a punitive view to whether or not member states have implemented regulation. It's actually the work that we've been doing for over 5 years with the industry, including with the 5G Industry Association, which has been the focus of our research and innovation work. And that is really helping there the development of the 5G technologies, but now helping with the deployment to overcome bottlenecks, but also simply to provide some of the funding that might be required to ensure that it is rolled out across the European Union. More importantly, and this goes back to what I was saying earlier, but we do believe that the real driver for 5G uptake, the full 5G, will be the business use cases, the verticals who will be able to apply 5G technologies to improving all aspects of their operations, become more innovative, and also to drive down cost. So those new business ecosystems are essential. We have several major pilots across several countries funded already in order to show the user groups in key sectors like transport and mobility, like health, even in agri-food, for example, as to the full scope of applications of 5G. And now, to answer your question, it is, of course, the next step. How do we globalize this? How do we make sure that it happens everywhere? We are working with an alliance of operators in the Alliance on Cloud and Edge to ensure that the next generation of technologies is fully incorporated into 5G, because we will increasingly be seeing cloud computing as something that is sitting beside the 5G networks out at the edge of those networks, and that's essential for Europe. We're also looking simply at funding. In the recovery and resilience funds that the European Council agreed and which is now in place, the member states in a number of countries have included 5G elements, deployment elements in their national recovery plans. That will go work together with investment funding from EU Invest that is available for large-scale infrastructure projects. And we're also, of course, thinking of the cross-border elements, and we have the Connected European Facility, in which we will ensure that major transport paths that cross European borders are actually fully equipped with 5G, standalone 5G, in order to support all of the logistics and transport necessary for the smooth running of the European internal market. So that's a lot of different activities where you asked Michelle about the 5G action plan. We will together be able to meet our objectives. We have the commercial rollout of 5G in all countries, but now we must ensure that we meet our next targets, which is to ensure coverage of all of the population, as well as developing these business cases. So I won't go into any more detail, but we already have more than 30 private 5G networks established in around 10 member states with EU funding, which are serving the purpose of piloting 5G services in different sectors and business sectors. And it shows that there's a pent-up demand there. Business is eager to start testing and using 5G services. So the member states have to get that spectrum available and licensed to operators so that we can actually benefit from 5G.
Thank you for the overview, and now I would turn to Ulf, but also I would add a question here. You've been working together with many different member states, and how do you see, why is the attitude towards 5G implementation so different in member states? How has your experience been with that?
Yeah, thanks for that, Annette. And first, let me just echo what Pierre said here, that there are significant values and benefits attached to connecting industries and agriculture. We worked with Analysys Mason to make a sort of an economic review of the benefits of 5G for businesses, and we saw that the benefits were the highest benefits were when it comes to smart manufacturing and actually smart agriculture. We saw that the investment sort of cost-benefit ratio of investments were 6 times. With the 40+ billion of investments, you can see a potential of more than 250 billion euros. So I think there are some really good examples here, but definitely smart factories, smart agriculture, including fixed wireless access based on 5G, will be the main beneficiaries when it comes to 5G in the business sector. But we should also remember that there will be environmental benefits because 5G is also green and it very much supports not only the digital transformation of Europe, but also the green transformation. And we see that the benefits flowing there will be definitely when it comes to smart factories, but also in agriculture, in construction, and of course, smart automotive. And if you see which countries are setting good examples, just coming back to the issue of coverage, and as Piers mentioned earlier, there are some countries that have reached a very high 5G broad coverage, geographical coverage, and that means that you offer this innovation, this fantastic innovation platform for all of your society, for all of your businesses. It's not selected just in the main cities or in some areas. And that, I think, is the most important. And that is also coming back to the spectrum issue, making mid-band spectrum available, but also in investment-friendly conditions. And I'm sure also the pilots that Piers mentioned can play a vital role here. And once again, coming back to the RRF, I mean, recovery resilience funds, I think all the 27 governments of the EU should really ensure to make the best possible use of these, and also to speeding up 5G.
All right, thanks for the overview as well from your side. Our audience is actually pretty active today, so we have received already a couple of questions, so I will also address them as well here. Tyson Parker has asked here, how can Europe ensure that age of computing and open RAN infrastructure are not eventually dominated by US-based hyperscalers? Maybe, Michal, you would like to answer that one here?
Yes, thank you very much. And it's so I think that Europe is already investigating this type of model, but as you can probably see also in the 5G observatory, it's to be considered as not mature yet. So some different companies have also invested to see to which extent Open RAN could offer a solution, and I think that Ulf is very well placed to tell some more about that, and this is definitely something we will go through with the national regulators in the coming years. But for the time being, it is not our priority. We will I would say stick to a more classical approach of vendors and build out of those 5G networks as they were announced. But still, it is a valid point, and we know we have to make the assessment of the pros and the cons of such technologies. But this is definitely something we will go through in the coming years. Over to you, Annette.
Thank you. We're coming to the questions also from the audience here, so kindly do prepare your questions. I would just ask my question now, and then you have also time to just stand up and ask your question here. So my question first before we go here to the audience is, what needs to happen so that 5G becomes a thriving platform for innovation and competitiveness across Europe? I would turn this question now all the way to Piers.
Thank you. Well, first of all, I'm going to sound very boring, but I have to say the first thing is that we have the spectrum pioneer bands made available, and particularly the mid bands as we already move towards the high bands. Why? It's because a lot of the low latency, but also high data bearing capacity will be on that mid band. That's a message I just have to hammer home. But then, of course, there's a lot more to do. We have to facilitate 5G deployments everywhere. So as well as the finance models, which we don't kid ourselves that the European Union financial contribution is still a very small amount of the overall investment required. So what we have to do is that we have to not just push and support MNOs, but help them to convince the investment community about the solidity of the investment case for a rapid rollout. And that comes, as I've said, partly from the demand for the new business models, where very important European industries, such as the automotive industry, are already pushing to move to what I would say a fully 5G world, fully 5G enabled world, for every element of their production line, every element of the ecosystem and value chain, and that will be reproduced across different business sectors. That will give us not just the innovation, it will also give us greater security as industry, as all aspects of the economy and society become more relevant and more dependent on communications technologies. And in doing all of that, we do actually have to look, and this is a challenge for the regulators that Michel leads, we also have to look at using our regulatory tools to allow more shared infrastructure, particularly in remote locations, particularly in terms of the deployment of base stations. We also have to increase capacity in areas where it wouldn't be profitable for one operator to invest on their own in the networks. And we think that that will pay back to the economy and to the society as a whole. We do also have to see some imagination and enterprise in Europe. 5G provides a great opportunity for new business cases, for new innovations. So that is not just meeting the needs of businesses at the moment, but actually developing new business cases. And the last aspect, but it's a very important one, is actually with regard to public administrations and public organizations and authorities who can avail of 5G to modernize their service provision, to drive down cost and make their services more attractive, not just to the public, but also again to the business communities, so that they can encourage, for example, the development of SMEs in clusters, not necessarily near to main cities, which will have a great beneficial effect, but which will be empowered and enabled by the compute power of 5G and edge computing working together. I could go on, but the fact is that the technology has all the promise and we now must avail of that.
Thank you. I would actually ask the same question also from Wolf. Do you have anything to add regarding how to make 5G becoming also a thriving platform for innovation across Europe?
Yeah, thank you for that. And I think it's really important to stress that this is not a technology issue. Technology is here. It's being rolled out. It's high capacity networks, and it's sort of only about creating the right enabling conditions for rollout also in Europe and catching up, I would say, with other regions of the world. And I mean, we are coming back to the same key messages here. It's about mid-band spectrum. It's about also stimulating use cases for businesses, in particular, who will be the main beneficiaries of full 5G. And it's also about public funding. It will play an important role, I'm sure. And will the RRF becoming operational in many member states more and more, that will play a vital role here. And as also Piers was referring to create the right incentives when it comes to investments, and it's about predictability of the regulatory environment, and also ensure that the operators have visibility and predictability when it comes to the license conditions, etc. So there's a set of, and there's no rocket science here. We know what is being required, and just to apply that now. And then I think Europe has a bright future for 5G.
Great. Then I would like both of you, Piers and Ulf, to talk about a little bit more the 5G corridors. There is a vision pan-EU 5G corridors for connected and automated mobility. Can you maybe elaborate this a little bit more in details? Maybe Piers, you go ahead first.
Sure, I'm very happy to. It has always been our wish that we have, first of all, large-scale pilots, sort of the deployment at scale of 5G to show business, industry, and governments just what it can provide. And the idea, the theme of 5G corridors on major transport paths crisscrossing European countries will also bring another key issue that we want to develop, which is that this is for the digital single market. There will be regulatory challenges there again, but if we think of one of the key use cases we've been looking at, which is an extension of manufacturing, is actually the logistics and transport business, where, as we saw during COVID, if we have blockages at borders, then the single market stops working, and very quickly business runs into trouble. We run into supply chains to the extent that people are worried about food not appearing on the shelves of their supermarkets. Now, 5G offers a lot more than that, but this is a great example where, by ensuring continuous 5G coverage of these transport paths as they cross from one country into another, you will have the full benefits of Internet of Things, of edge computing, and simply of logistic managerial control. It means greater efficiency, including the environmental benefits and transport. But also, if we are supporting the rollout, the development of the 5G radio access network, which would in itself draw down more of the backhaul, the fiber rollout, that then brings fiber and 5G into rural areas in many cases, mountainous regions, etc., which otherwise would not get 5G for some time. So this has been the subject already of several programs, pilots funded under our 5G public-private partnership, our research program under the previous European Union research. That is now being mirrored in our new Horizon Europe planning under the new joint undertaking. But more importantly, we now have this fund called the Connecting Europe Facility, which will be devoted, one part of it, of course, under CEF Broadband, will be devoted to the corridors, where groups of member states come together and develop from the pilots we've already run these cross-border corridor systems. So you will have end-to-end real 5G, standalone 5G operating on these routes, and then the ability at a lower cost to take spur lines, if you like, off into the regions that are passed through in order to ensure the acceleration of the rollout. So it has a multiplier effect with a relatively small amount of European taxpayers' money associated with what business are prepared to put in, and of course local government. We then have a significant investment that accelerates 5G.
Great. Also, Ulf, do you have anything to add from the Ericsson point of view?
Yeah, very briefly, I concur with peers here, and Ericsson is very much involved in one of these corridors between the Baltic nations, Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania. And we also identify, and of course, as does the transport and logistics companies, the potential of 5G. And when we talk to companies like Volvo Group, for example, I mean, they are also sort of sharing our frustration that 5G is not happening fast enough in Europe, and also emphasizing what Pierre said here, that this takes for a harmonized approach, cooperative approach between the member states of the European Union. That is fundamental to this. I mean, we can't have initiatives that stop at the national borders here. We need to have the European perspective in everything we do in this space.
And now I
come back in again. Yeah. Can I?
Go ahead, Pierce.
Sorry for.
No. Go ahead.
But there's one other very important issue, which I really should have mentioned, which is, of course, another of the technology policies that we're pursuing, where we feel that Europe will be in the lead, is in relation to connected and autonomous mobility, where with the use of 5G and other technologies, we will be able to accelerate the development of driver support, autonomous mobility, and much more intelligent and safe and also environmentally friendly transport, particularly in the goods transport industry, where the lorries will be able to operate much more efficiently and safely. So that is actually very good for the environment, very good for business, and also very good for safety. And that will also be the use case to allow Europe to develop these CAM technologies, as we call them, in competition with other regions of the world. So sorry for breaking in again, but that's very important.
Absolutely, no worries. That's what panel discussions are for. I would now turn to you, Michael, and ask a question. We brought it out here, a couple of sectors, what 5G is successful for, and like mobility, but there's plenty of other sectors as well that we can use this fast connection. What do you think, what are the sectors that EU would take a leader position of using 5G connection?
Thank you very much, Annette. From a regulator perspective, it's not a real easy question to answer. It is more economical related than related to the regulation of the regulatory stemming from the regulatory framework. So what we try to do is providing a framework that based on a non-discriminatory approach for all types of users, including industry, of course, which is the main focus of 5G. And so without real differentiating between sectors of types of industries, and so it's not really up to us to try to help more one type of sector than another, and to pick and choose winners in this area. But we'll see, and Piers also mentioned it, that there is a lot of trials across Europe, and we also held a stakeholder workshop a few weeks ago, and it was really interesting to hear from vertical actors what they are going to do and what they are still implementing from different sectors of the industry, like shipyards, of automotive, Piers refers to, but not really easy for us as regulators to see which type of sector will be the leading one in Europe.
Anyone else want to add like which sectors EU should take the leading role there? Piers?
Well, I can just jump in, and as we saw in our study, we think that smart manufacturing, I mean, Europe is one of the world leading regions when it comes to manufacturing, and we have then a great potential to digitize manufacturing, to have smart manufacturing. I think that there's a huge potential, but also, as we saw in our studies, in agriculture, I mean, smart agriculture is also an area where I think we can increase European competitiveness with the application of 5G.
Great. Moving on to the next question here. Both private and public financing can be sometimes very difficult to access for the SMEs, which have brought it up here a couple of times, for them to develop 5G applications and business models as well. The EU and member states funding remains clearly crucial when it comes to SMEs from very early stage already. However, there is no dedicated 5G focus programs available at the EU level, as SMEs are starting to play more essential role in a global ecosystem. Do you think it should be vital for the European Union to take further actions to drive 5G innovation? And how could Europe support 5G related SMEs? I would turn this question to Piers.
Well, thank you. Yes, the role, but also the potential of European SMEs is very significant. So we have had and do still and will continue to fund innovation in general for SMEs and startups, but specifically on 5G, which is your question, which I think is totally justified. The first thing is to say that we are changing our research model. We've had a very successful public-private partnership focusing on research and innovation. We're now moving to a model which is called a joint undertaking. It will do research in 5G, beyond 5G, and maybe even start some work on what will be 6G. But it is also an instrument to work on deployment, on innovation, on the development of these use cases, and on developing ecosystems, specifically to allow SMEs to participate and to benefit. So that's one key area where in looking at, in providing financing for the testing of ideas from SMEs, we actually give them the opportunity to receive support. Of course, the main investment funds of the European Union, not just the RRF, which is very big but a once-off, but also EU Invest and some of the other funds, will increasingly be looking at digital. As you know, for example, the RRF funds, 20% of those funds must go on digital projects. And we expect even more in relation to EU Invest, etc. And that will focus on what is Europe's natural powerhouse. And Ulf will have no problem, I know, in recognizing this. We have some major global leaders here in Europe who are at the forefront of our drive with regard to 5G and other communications technologies and networks. And in their slipstream, but also now maybe even cutting across them, are startups, disruptive SMEs, whom we need for the business ecosystem if Europe is to thrive. So that is a real focus of the joint undertaking, and it will also be a focus of our Digital Europe program, where we are seeking to roll out a number of digital technologies, talking about artificial intelligence, HPC, but now specifically in cloud and in 5G. We will see smaller companies, for example, working on telco edge provision and in providing innovative technologies and services with European funding. We hope and expect that the member states will match that funding so that we do now create a real innovative entrepreneurial environment for SMEs to grow.
There is also the question that I would actually like to ask from all of our panelists here. So we also talk about very often the awareness of 5G in general, like in public. Do you think that should the European Union focus more on improving the understanding and awareness of 5G of investors too, and how has this been addressed these days? Maybe Michal, over to you. Do you think that we should be focusing more on raising the awareness and especially also the investors, but of course also the public awareness of 5G connection?
Yes, thank you very much, and this is a very interesting question, of course. And as you probably know, for years we have here that this sector is over-regulated, and the good news, it's not the case anymore. And this is the backdrop of the European Electronic Communications Code, with an overarching objective towards efficient investment. So this is a very investment-friendly environment, complemented by the BEREC guidelines to ensure the consistent and harmonized implementation over Europe. Second element, if you compare the situation with the situation many years ago, there's less markets that needs to be regulated. So we are going little by little towards the application of general competition law in this sector as well. Moreover, in this framework, you have also some very important tools to incentivize investments, such as co-investment schemes. On this, there is a lot of work to do, but there are already some co-investment agreements in different forms just to lower the costs. Piers referred also more specifically regarding 5G, the possibility to share infrastructure, and infrastructure sharing is something we really support. With BEREC, we adopted 2 years ago a common position on that, where we described different parameters, and so this is an important tool as well to lower the cost and improve the coverage. And as I have already mentioned, the Broad and Cost Reduction Directive will also, once reviewed, played a role to facilitate the rollout and the deployment of 5G, and so to lower the costs, which is also good news for the investor. It will be my answer so far.
Thank you. Now also very short answers from both Piers and Ulf as well. How does Ericsson and how does the European Commission address these raising awareness of 5G? Piers, over to you.
Well, I think I think GLOBSEC is doing a fantastic job by just organizing this event. So I think awareness is there, but I think we just need to continue to stress how important 5G is for competitiveness and of Europe. It's a fundamental innovation platform for all our societies and all our businesses. And I think it's great that the RRF is identifying 20% for ICT investments. But as I said, and then of course it's up to the member states to continue to drive that and make use of it in the way that has been decided. But also to understand that 5G will also play a role for the green transformation. because it's not only creating efficiencies and productivity increases, but it also helps us take us to a more sustainable future and sustainable businesses. So I think we're on the right track.
I would just have to cut you off from here, and Piers, in 2 sentences, how should we raise the awareness of 5G? 2 sentences only.
There won't be a sort of a publicity campaign, because that's not what it's about. We will continue to work with different business sectors to help them to actually work out the use cases and show how business can actually find that on the technology. So 5G applications in the sectors are the way to convince them and their investors that it's the way forward.
Thank you, and I would like to thank everyone, especially people here in the room. Thank you for joining me this morning, and thank you for all the panelists, of course, who shared their experience in this field. And I do hope that Europe is taking a leading role soon when it comes to 5G connections. And I hope the panel was interesting also to all of our listeners that joined us virtually. We hope to see you next time here in Bratislava. Just for some information as well, that refreshments are downstairs, and the next session will begin here in the same room at 11:10. So I would like to thank you from my side and wishing you a very, very pleasant stay.